You're listening to the Digital Deep Dive, where we tackle the newest trends, strategies, and pain points shaping growth across the digital landscape. From Amazon and D2C to international expansion, join our host and e-commerce leaders across multiple industries for in-depth discussions on how to maximize your brands in the digital arena. Now, here's your host, Aaron Conant.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Digital Deep Dive. I'm your host here, Aaron Conant. If I kind of jump into what I want to talk about today, it's around content. And I don't think anybody's going to be shocked that content is top of everybody's mind. There's a lot of budget cuts going around. And, it's one of those things that always pops up. But recently did an event with Tom Logan over at Cohley around this case for not cutting content, and why should we hang on to it? And so it was a great conversation then. I want to make sure that we captured it here. But Tom, I'll kick it over to you briefly. If you want to do, kind of intro on yourself. We've had you on in the past. Yeah. You're always fun. You're a great partner, support of the network. So really appreciate you and the team and everything you guys are doing. But yeah, I'll kind of kick it over to you. If you want to do a brief intro yourself and Cohley, that'd be awesome. Sure. And then we'll kind of jump in.
Yeah. Well, feelings mutual on everything that you mentioned. We certainly appreciate the hell out of you. I'm Tom, co-founder and CEO at Cohley. My background is actually in user-generated content. We started Cohley back in 2016 when we saw influencer marketing as kind of the answer to all of our challenges within user-generated content production, original brand-centric content creation. Influencer was becoming very table stakes at that point, but everyone was just obsessed with reach, engagement, likes, etc. We saw the influencer world, or really like the beginnings of the creator economy, as like the answer to all of our prayers, because these people were creating really valuable branded content that, fast forward 7 years into 2023 is now very much like the way that brands are connecting with would-be consumers. You look at the rise of platforms like TikTok, etc. Very creator-driven, very authentic, real storytelling that connects with very specific groups of people in more of a one-to-one way. And, when you think about a brand, can't really think about that brand without also thinking about the content that they're putting out, right? It's synonymous with a brand. So on the subject of the case for not cutting content, what we mean by that, of course, is not cutting content budgets. And being smarter with content budgets, but it's also the case for using content as a real catalyst for growth when a lot of your competitors might be slimming down, going back to what's worked in the past, and not experimenting with new things. We think that content can open up new channels like TikTok, can enable you to reach different demographics, can improve your ad testing by introducing net new creative and finding new winners. So there's a lot of different things that we think content can do for marketers in a challenging economy or in a booming economy.
Yeah, I mean, it's super interesting because over the past 2.5 or 3 years, this demand has gone up like 10 or 20 fold for content. And, it's also been a pain point, and it's also been costly. So it's not surprising that people are considering trimming their content budgets as a whole. It's just going back to where they were before. But you're saying, no, it will just kind of revert you back to where you were before. And then how are you seeing brands, like what percentage of brands do you see maintaining their content budget? And then are they accelerating because they're just taking advantage of the lack of content as people dial back?
Depends where brands are at. I think it can vary quite a bit. We do see brands get creative in terms of turning to ambassador programs, their own employees sometimes, getting creative with existing content that they have and repurposing it in creative ways. For us, I think that part of it is like part of our positioning is, hey, don't cut content costs. But also you're doing it in a responsible way. Like when you're turning to third-party creators for branded content, like that's a hell of a lot less expensive than it is to just ramp up budgets for more photo shoots, more photo shoots or more video shoots or more agency work that's very professional. the whole notion of that, of ramping up those budgets to increase performance doesn't really work because basically your output isn't all that much greater, and you just need so much different. You need such a different volume of asset to be able to put into the content machine to understand like what's really working, what's really resonating, what's really performing. And by just like, working with an agency for another $30,000 project to get one more really nicely done video, that's just not the level of testing that you need. And that's why we love like user generated video, short form video, and on platforms like TikTok and Instagram. Um, Very easy to generate lots of net new inputs, understand what's working, and spin that into better results.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about kind of what you're describing, it fits in naturally with the traditional CMO and their mindset around
Mhm.
content, right? Is these photo shoots, these video shoots where it's a lot of money, you get a few
Yep.
assets, but you burn through those so fast economically, you
Yeah.
can't do that anymore. You can still do it, but that can't be your only lever to pull anymore because you need there's so many different avenues to publish content on, and it's consumed so fast that
Well, that's the thing, right? It's like, yeah, brands' overall need for content has spiked at such a crazy rate over the last 10 years, and primarily with the rise of new digital channels, the need to personalize messaging more one to one, and the need to do more testing than ever before because these platforms reward more testing, right? Like we harp on this out all the time, but the only difference between top performers on Facebook and the median performer is that the top performer tests 11 times more creative in their ad testing, right? Because that means that they're more likely to find more winners, drive higher click-through rates, have more favorable CPMs, and reap the rewards from that.
let me so I mean, we talked about this before. Like, it's like a numbers game. Like TikTok right now is a
Yeah,
numbers game, right? And the reality is that everybody's like, "Oh, how do I get something to go viral?" Well, if it's a percentage game, then you just do as many as you possibly can, and you'll eventually hit
yeah.
one, right?
I mean, we've talked about this before, but like I think one of the more liberating things for marketers to really understand and process today is that like it's great to have a brand ethos and a brand vision and sort of brand guidelines, but within those bounds, you need to be okay with the fact that you aren't always going to know what's going to perform best for you. That can be a hard pill to swallow for a lot of marketers because they very likely came up being told they were creative, and data can be a little bit of a threat if it's sort of posed in a negative light to them. But these are not things to shy away from. I mean, using data to help guide strategy and to help refine your creative processes is a very healthy process to be in, and one that marketers are very capable of embracing. It's just that, hey, like you just don't always know what's going to work. I mean, when we look at TikTok too, we obviously spent all this time talking about um, lower CPMs and paid acquisition strategies on TikTok, et cetera. But like one of the more interesting things that we've been tracking with TikTok is how just like organic TikTok content is playing into the buyer journey. So like when people are in that consideration phase, right before they're kind of moving to actually making a purchase, they're going on TikTok to find videos that just live organically, natively on the platform, and that's basically their new age review, watching little 30-second videos, trying to process what the product's all about, what people like, what people don't like, and that's influencing offline buyer behavior. I don't know if you saw in that article I just wrote, like you have a big brand like the prebiotic soda company Poppy attributing a 15% lift to their TikTok content when it comes to their offline sales, their in-store sales. And they have all these complex attribution models, et cetera. They've worked with Walmart on some other retailers, but that's no joke, and that's not even tying back to paid. That's just having lots of content kind of flood this platform that people are spending an average of 62 minutes a day on, which is pretty mind blowing.
Then if I'm, the marketer, how am I, teaching upwards? How am I explaining? How am I influencing upwards? I say, hey, don't cut this. I need to test 9 out of 10 of these are going to fail, but one is going to give me 20x return, which is going to cover all the cost of everything else, right? It's almost like a PE mindset, right? I'm going to gamble on 10, 7 are going to lose, 2 break even, 1 wins, right? It's
pretty much.
It's like,
and you
I
don't
don't know
know
if that's
which
a good
one
way to
is going
explain
to
it
flush
up.
out. Yeah, no, I think it's a very good way to explain it. Yeah. I mean, what's the difference between, 3x ROAS and 1x return on ad spend? I got to stay away from using too many acronyms. Try not to, but we live in this world. It can be difficult. But yeah, I mean, if you look at the sort of positive impact of finding net new winning creative, it can be massive. But then part of the challenge of it is that once you find that winning creative, you do have to still test, say, 20% of your creative against that new king of the hill, because there's always a risk of that content starting to fatigue, starting to wane in performance, and you got to make sure that you're trying to always replace it. So it's this like test and learn strategy that we see in like winning brands DNA. It's not just like let's test until we get it right. It's a total feedback loop.
Yeah, I'm thinking if I'm heading up a marketing team,
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably setting like this little incentive in place where everybody's working together as a team. And
Mm-hmm.
anytime new creative outperforms a previous best creative, at that point in time, I'm dumping money into a pot, or I'm handing
Mm-hmm.
out a bonus or an Amazon gift card to everybody on
Yeah,
the team. So it's not this individual effort, it's this group effort. And when one person wins, the whole team wins. How do we beat that
exactly.
top performing asset and just having it happen over and over and over again? Because you're right, that you can't just hang on to that one piece forever. In 2 weeks, it's going to be out of date, right? That's probably a reality.
Totally. Yes. I mean, you see, like, really, when we talk about the case for not cutting content, um, what we're really talking about is risk mitigation, because it's everything is just a measure of risk, right? Especially when you get into the boardroom, the executive level. It's risk management, and to cut content does introduce risk that I don't think a lot of executives fully comprehend, because they see this as like, oh, it's like a bunch of photos or a bunch of videos. Like, we don't need this. Like, this is dumb. This isn't moving the needle for us. But like, it does. It really does. And when you start looking at the full funnel impact, the impact of finding, new audiences, of establishing viable new acquisition channels, um, I mean, it's massive.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of case studies a year from now
Hmm.
around, right now it's the case for not cutting content. A year from now, it's going to be the proof around, not cutting content. Because I think there's a lot of the trial
Yeah,
and error that's going on right now. And it is hard sometimes to argue with the executive team when in some ways they're right. I can cut this now and save money.
it's an easy cut,
Yeah.
right? And you might be avoiding a riff, which is, obviously very painful, can have impacts on morale. Um,
Right.
those aren't exactly fun either. So sometimes, looking to cut variable, I get it. It's much easier. I want to go back to something that you said a few minutes ago, in terms of managing up. This was something that came up on the webinar as well. What and not just specifically to content, but just in general, when you're talking to more of that manager level or that director level that reports into that VP level or into the C-suite, what have you generally heard from people, in terms of where they've had the most success in terms of positioning things successfully to basically drive towards outcomes that they think are favorable for their team and their efforts? How do you
Um,
manage up in those situations?
it's in almost every case data.
Uh-huh.
At the executive level. So I'll jump around it. I'll give the classic horrible answer of it depends. If you're a
Uh-huh.
smaller brand, like a high-end fashion brand, but fairly small, and so you have the
Mm-hmm.
actual founder is running it, that gets really, really
Mm-hmm.
tough because a lot, especially around content, they want to stay on content. And
Oh
so
yeah.
that's more of just a personal discussion around, hey, how is this going to enhance this brand personally to the right audience that they're trying to target to help them feel better? Because at the end of the day, a lot of times people who founded those, they already have enough money, right? And they're there because they like the awareness, they like their name on the brand, they like saying they run the brand, and it's good. But if they don't double next year or the next 3 years, they don't really care. But it's cool to have their own high-end fashion brand. That's usually where that ends up. But if we take like the traditional, it is data. If you're going to influence the executive team, they have to see data, because they have to point something back to as like a CYA. Why did they make that decision? And if they say, I made that decision because Bobby said it was the right thing, they're in trouble. But if they can say, we made this decision because Bobby came in with all of this data and everything in the back end checked out, and we're able to compare it to what other brands were doing, and we made a decision, and that wasn't the wrong decision. Actually, it was over here. That's what they want, right? It's the classic. This is a class. I don't know if CYA is the right term, but
I know what you're
that's
saying.
what it is. They want something to make them feel good about the decision they made, because
the justification and validation to it. Yep.
Because they don't understand. They literally don't understand. I was just talking to one of the largest footwear companies, right? Fashion, high-end fashion footwear. And it's literally the exact same discussion. Content is all over the place right now. And it was literally around, like, how do I even get them to buy into the fact that I need 3D AR, virtual, maybe it's virtual try on. I need a personalization tool. How do you even introduce that without saying, hey, here's 3 brands that have done it, and we saw them spike over the last 3 years. That's why they're growing. And we're not doing it. And so again, getting back, what I really like is your risk mitigation. That's what it is.
That really is what it is.
If I'm a marketer, I'm listening right now, I'm factoring in risk mitigation. Tom, that was a golden nugget right there, because you're right. If you're not doing it, everybody is. It's a risk.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting how some brands are, very much like pride themselves on being first movers, first adopters of new technology. And so many others are like, prove to me where it's been done successfully elsewhere in the most like one-to-one, example possible. Right. And make that case. So it's not just like it's interesting how some brands are like that and some aren't.
Yeah, I think
Why do you think that is? Is that happy? Yeah. What's your read on why some brands fall into one category or the other?
Directly, inversely, I should say, inversely proportional to size. So it's how much do you have to lose? And then you have some outliers, the Nikes, the Apples, right? They're outside of it all, right? They're playing a different game than we're all playing.
Totally.
But it's inversely proportional. It's the more you have to lose, the less risk you take. And the less you have to lose, the bigger the risk you take.
Totally.
You don't have as much to lose. So why not give it a whirl? And it's inherently in those situations where they're usually, that the middle is a great balance. But as soon that middle becomes the inflection point, so then it rapidly goes like this, because they don't want to ruin. They don't realize what got them there was the ability to test and learn as fast as they could and take risks. And then they don't want to ruin what they have, so they stop taking risk. And then you get into this.
No. But then you're at a real, but then you're introducing a bunch of risk where you're no longer innovating, you're no longer pushing the limits, and you're like a team that has a big lead in the second half and just kind of, stops trying to score, run out the clock, and then all of a sudden you lose.
That's exactly it. It permeates our culture as a whole, right?
Right. It does. It does.
It goes from I want to win to just don't lose.
Yeah. And so what do you think? What do you think the best balance is there? Removing Apple and Nike, is it like having an innovation team or innovation labs within that sort of larger org that helps infuse data and helps push the limit on it, or is it more of just like a cultural type of thing?
It's a cultural type of thing, but it's rooted in, I believe every company should have an R&D budget. So what happens if you get a separate unit, they're always chasing the new shiny object, and they find it, and then they hand it off and they go chase the next one. And you're left with a team who did none of the due diligence. They don't know what's going on. They may not be enamored with it. So it's
Mm-hmm.
usually there's an R&D budget, and you're encouraging each group to go find the new shiny object that they would like to run with. By the way, they're going to
Mm-hmm.
own it in the end. They're not getting
Mm-hmm.
the shiny object and handing it off. You're going to own it. So the shiny object better actually work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then having this R&D budget. So, right, my background, I'm a chemist, right?
Mm-hmm.
R&D, you're flushing money down the drain every day on
Totally.
research.
Totally.
And 99 out of every
The
100
ultimate
experiments I did,
capex, right? Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
The 99 of every 100 experiments I did, they failed. When I got one that worked, I mean, it was a game changer financially, right? And
Right.
so I'm designing 13-step synthetic pathways. I want to shrink it down to 7 or 8. And every
Mm-hmm.
time I trim out 2 or 3, well, I wasted a bunch of money. I just saved the company a ton when we got to trim out 3. And so you
Mm-hmm.
have to be willing then as a company to set aside that money and know the money's gone. The money is gone. Now,
Yep.
where will it show up? It'll show up in, you know, a viral TikTok post. It'll show up in a creative that goes crazy. It'll
Sure.
show up in a new wording or content, or SEO is, where something goes bonkers and you sell
Mm-hmm.
a ton. That's where it's going to show up. But the R&D budget needs to be set aside and
Mm-hmm.
untouchable, or
Not cut.
based on total dollar value. And then it can't fall to the shiny objects team.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where you get these companies that get to the middle point, and everything slows down a little just based on risk and size and everything else, but they can keep spiraling up rather than
Mm-hmm.
kind of hitting that inflection and start spiraling. It's not really like they just drop off. It's more like a up and down, but every time you sink a little more, then you go back up.
I was listening to a critique of Google the other day on a podcast, and there's not that many things that well, they're a massive company, so there are different things to critique them on. But obviously, just want to caveat it by saying they're the most successful company probably in the history of the world. But the whole point was that they've tried to incubate a variety of different startups from within, right? But basically, the critique of their entire like startup incubation model is that there are no repercussions for failure. So like they try to say that they're bringing in all these great smart people with all these accolades, very well qualified, who to outside of Google could very much start their own startup. Why don't we just do it within this ecosystem? But like because there's been no consequences of failure, they haven't been able to drive the same level of urgency and the same level of innovation that they ordinarily would within a startup that was living independently. I thought that was an interesting. There's almost like
Oh,
some like very human like psychological dynamics in there. It's like
oh
the
yeah. I
safety
mean,
net changes everything.
yeah, yeah. There's a difference between having this R&D budget and having people use it without
Hmm.
fear of failure
Hmm.
versus never winning and
I don't
always
think they
failing.
really shared in the upside either. Like I don't. I think that was part of the problem too. It's not that there weren't any consequences for failure. It's not just that. It's also that they didn't have a real stake in the game. Part of the drive for a founder, obviously, is that if you have a hit on your hands, like you're very much rewarded for that.
Right.
Um, and if it's all the same to you, like probably not gonna put in that extra work and find
Right.
solutions to the challenges that you're facing at any given time. Yeah.
Wow. No. Yeah. You have to get something out of it, right? If you're encouraging these people to go find the next
Right.
hit and they get
Right.
nothing on the back end.
Right.
I mean,
Some
my
sort of rev share, whatever it is. Yep.
yeah. I mean, my wife was an engineer in automotive for a long time, and they rewarded everybody. If you came up with a new idea that worked,
Hmm.
right? Like you got a
One of those
check.
game changing ideas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. You got a check for figuring it out. And that was a big thank you. Like you just saved us a ton and it was all based on how much money you saved them.
As it should be.
And you could literally just, and
It
people
should be
knew like,
proportional, right?
exactly. That
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
yeah, everybody wins in that scenario.
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
that's,
So what else should we talk about? Should we talk about well actually talk to me about I mean TikTok's obviously a hot button topic for just about everyone. What are you hearing from brands specifically related to TikTok right now? I mean, you have on the one hand, we have it's always like our highest performing marketing collateral, like TikTok. How do we jump on this opportunity? On the other hand, you have these like complicated geopolitical factors that also include the risk of potentially having the app be banned for a period of time or forced to switch to U.S. ownership, et cetera. But generally speaking, just a lot of certainly a lot of like fervor and upside, but also just a lot of confusion on how to manage the opportunity. And what are you hearing from brands right now?
I think you kind of nailed it with the concern is, well, is this
Yeah.
going to be around? I'm kind of like,
All right.
ride the horse till it's not there anymore. It's a
Yeah.
great horse, right?
Yeah. It's a good horse. Very
Like if
much
you
so.
think the horse is going to win, the first two races in the Triple Crown and lose the third, you still
That's a
ride
good,
it and bet on it
that's
for
a
the
good
first two,
comparison.
right? Like,
Yeah. 100%.
why would you not ride this horse? It's here because we
It's a good
don't really
analogy.
know. We don't know if it's going to be around or not, but we do know
Hmm.
that it's performing for pretty much everybody. It doesn't have quite the same return on ad spend per unit,
Hmm.
but costs are lower to do anything on the platform.
Right.
And randomly, if you do enough, like we're talking about, if you do enough, you're gonna get a hit every now and again.
Hmm.
And so kind of that's number one. That's kind of my response is like
Hmm.
ride the horse as long as you can. Um, the other thing is just, if again we break it down to on brand, I mean, how many times have we talked about this? You and I, the on brand, we had a chuckle about on brand versus off brand content.
Hmm.
You can't guarantee complete on brand content on the platform. It's not going to
It's the
happen
wild,
because
wild west
if it's
for
completely on
traditional minded
brand, people aren't
creatives.
going to look at it. They
Hmm.
want that authentic view.
Totally.
I mean, and so you have to be comfortable with that standpoint. And then you have to be comfortable with the data, right? Which is, something that we've chuckled about before is
Hmm.
when people think their audience is one demographic and it's actually another
Hmm.
demographic, are you going to
Hmm.
accept that or not? And that can completely change the course of your company, or it
Yeah.
can keep it on the flat line path it's on.
Which part of the reason that we've laughed about it is that there are plenty of marketers who would rather stay flat or, grow more modestly and not sell into that audience that's clearly asking for it or demonstrating a real affinity for their product. I think it's hard. It's hard for founders, especially in the consumer product space, because a lot of times the reason they start a company is because they had a problem themselves that they wanted to solve for, and they just assume that their target market is going to be people who are exactly like themselves. But that's not always the case.
I
In
call it
fact, I
me
think it's
search. I call it me
yeah,
search.
yeah. It's like you just can't get out of your own head that like, okay, obviously this was my challenge. I'm going to sell to people exactly like me. A lot of times that's not the case.
Yeah. I think it's also
Yeah.
funny when that's actually your problem when you kick off, the company, maybe you're 30 and you kick it off. By the time it really gets going, you're almost 40 and you're hitting your stride, not realizing that your target market is now 40, but you're still
Yeah.
trying to market to the 30-year-olds.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
they,
Yeah. Yeah.
they
Yeah.
already solved it. They're a completely different demographic now.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Maybe
They
I'm
don't have that
aging
problem.
myself a little bit.
No, no, no. Exactly. So what about we were talking about asset creation before we jumped on and then the organization of those assets across a large organization. I think that was the same footwear company that you were just talking to that has this same type of challenge. We see so many different silos come up um, between different parts of larger brands, larger, consumer goods organizations or consumer facing organizations where, we might work with one team, they generate a ton of assets and, they might cancel on us and then we'll start working with another team or we'll start talking to another team and they're like, "Oh my God, like this is exactly what we've needed. Like, why did we not have this?" I'm like, "Well, that's really a question for you all, not for us." But
Wait,
yeah, I
wait.
mean, how do you, yeah, so
The
explain
flip,
the
the flip
problem.
side happens
Yeah.
as well, which is,
Hmm.
um, where you're now an ecom and you inherit something like, where
Hmm.
did you come up with, how did you decide on this dam, right?
Hmm.
For digital asset management, how did you decide
Hmm.
on this dam over here?
Hmm. Hmm.
And they're like, well, we didn't, like they did. Well, why were they in charge of picking the asset manager?
Right.
Like, well, they were the only ones at the time. Well, when did you start talking to these guys? You unravel it. It was a couple years ago. And this
Hmm.
team that doesn't really deal with the digital assets, but they were the traditional marketing team, they got sold, right? And now
Right.
you're at a new one. You have to unravel everything that they've done. So I think it's an inherent part of the organization of larger larger organizations today, that a lot of decisions had to be made really, really quick, starting, you know, at the start of the pandemic.
Hmm.
Uh, Decisions had to be made quickly,
Hmm.
and digital teams weren't big enough. And so those tasks were given to multiple people in multiple different departments. And once you've signed on to some of these contracts, they're so big and people don't want to admit that they're wrong, right? The best thing is just to say, listen, I messed up. I'm wrong. I made the best
Of
possible
course.
decision at the time. But now I agree. Let's move on to something different. But a lot of times you have the people that don't want to admit that and they're holding on to legacy solutions. Well, then they get siloed
Hmm.
because this solution doesn't talk to, we'll say, Shopify.
Hmm.
Well, if you're on Shopify and the solution doesn't have a built-in integration and you have to do a custom one, and every time Shopify is updated or your system's updated, they stop talking, like then you start breaking the silos and then you have finger pointing going on. And that really slows down organizations as a whole. But
Hmm.
that's kind of like one of the biggest things that I see is this new technology that, there's something new launched every 2-3 weeks now that you quote unquote have to have.
Hmm.
Um, that they continually pop up because the sales teams for a lot of this tech, they want to get to anybody in the company, kind of like what you were talking about, which is, a lot of these solutions can touch 3 or 4 different parts.
Oh yeah.
And so they will get anyone. And a lot of times I'll have RFP. So, all I do is talk to brands all day, every day. And I'll talk to a brand and digital marketing one week and then on, web development the following week. And
Hmm.
they're looking for the same solution, but they're not even talking to each other. Uh,
Right.
they're like, do you have any connections? Like, yeah, you need to talk to Bobby
Yeah,
at your
I
own
actually have a
company.
connection. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's the same email domain as you, believe it or not.
Yeah, I know, right? I want to
Yeah,
introduce you to the perfect person for this. Like, oh, is it
yeah.
a service
Is it
provider?
a vendor?
No,
Is it a
it's actually in your company.
Yeah, 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 yeah. They're actually going through a full RFP right now.
Yeah, right now you're already talking
You
like,
should get you should get it on that. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
uh, what are you most
I
excited
think,
about though? Like, what's next for what you guys are doing? Because I mean, we've been friends
yeah.
for years now, and you guys are
Hmm.
constantly pivoting and listening to the customer, and
Hmm.
um, it's just fun to watch. Like, what are you seeing? What are you guys prepping for next?
Yep.
Um, and then maybe we
Yeah.
get into metaverse. Like, have you
You always
touched
want to talk
that
about
at
the metaverse. We
all?
could not not really. I would say that like any form of content can very much live in the metaverse, and that'll open up even more levels of personalization based on demonstrated interest. I think. Maybe even pre-iOS. Depends on, I guess, how privacy settings end up fitting into their advertising model and whatnot.
Uh-huh.
Um, but
Because that really
yeah,
spiked
I
over the
mean,
past years, and now it seems to be waning. And I think it'll spike again, and then it'll wane. So we can set that
I think
aside.
it's cool. I think it's cool technology. It's just a matter of like whether or not people actually want to commit to spending time within the metaverse. But I do think it's absolutely mind blowing. I was just on a driving range hitting some golf balls in the metaverse earlier today. It was lovely. Yeah, I
That's
think they were going straighter than they ordinarily would, but
yeah.
that's okay. Yeah, what I'm excited about is actually it's not necessarily the sexiest thing in the world. It's not metaverse related, but it's taking more of like a full funnel focus with our client base. What I mean by that is for the last some odd years we've been very focused on a short form video creative that performs primarily in a paid capacity on these social channels. And that's we've realized that that's all extremely valuable, but also realized that like once we get that traffic, once we get that click onto the product page, onto the website, if that website isn't fully optimized for conversion, then what are we doing? What's the point of what we're doing? So there's a lot of facets to go into website conversion, most of which you know a hell of a lot more about than I do. Site speed, load times, video hosting, all these things.
It's a whole
So
nother
what we're
podcast, my friend.
it's a whole nother pod. I know, I know, I know. So I won't go too far into it. But what we are realizing that we can have a huge impact on is product sampling for reviews. Just having sufficient numbers of reviews that's really been a part of our business that's taken off. because the creators are actually the ones creating the reviews and not just like Joe Schmo. Um, they're higher quality, and they oftentimes, like 70% of the time, come with imagery that helps like bring that review to life. And speaking of risk, like if you launch a product that doesn't have 50 plus reviews, you're immediately looking at a 30% reduction in conversion. So like if we're going to talk about higher performing ad creative and testing more ad creative, getting on TikTok, etc., and then we're not going to talk about making sure that your reviews and the content on your actual website is optimized for conversion, then what are we doing? Like we're doing you a disservice because we're only touching one part of your funnel. So the reviews piece has been really interesting because it's allowed us to actually have conversations with the e-commerce team in conjunction with the sort of paid or larger marketing team. And we can actually look at like, all right, what the hell are we actually doing here? What are we actually trying to drive towards? It's not enough to just get a click and to drive traffic. We need to actually make sure that these people are getting the information that they need to make informed purchases once they land on the website. Because ultimately that's all that matters. Like if a paid person is like, I did my job, look at this winning creative, it's performing so well. Look at how high the click-through rate is. Good for you. Like if it's not translating to actual growth, actual purchases, then that's doing the company a disservice. So starting to have those more like that full funnel view of the customer journey and all the touch points included. Um, it's kind of like like I was saying, product reviews are not exactly like the sexiest topic, but for us, they're very, very important for just a really good, solid, effective top to bottom strategy.
Yeah, I was just took a note that has to be one. Is a podcast for new product launches, like holistically, because a lot of people think new item launches, well, Amazon, right? But
Yep.
that's not everywhere that it's going. And anyways, it just had me going that
Yeah.
we're at next level. It's like digital 3.5. I don't want to say 4 quite yet, where you have to be operating at the next level
Yep.
because of all the demands that are out there.
That's exactly right. And something that'll will will resonate with you is that a lot of these brands continue to convey to us that they are under more and more pressure from Walmart, from Target, from other major retailers online, that they need to have sufficient numbers of reviews or they'll delist, deprioritize. They ain't doing as much for you. So like whereas that brand to retailer relationship used to be kind of a warmer, fuzzier one that kind of had equal balance to it. Now I'd say it's pretty cutthroat for brands who are looking to do more with retailers and reviews and the promotion of an influencer can play into this too, like having creators go into Walmart, go to Sprouts, show where products can be created, but in particular, like getting reviews syndicated to these major retailer sites is just a non-negotiable. You need the social proof.
Yeah, I think maybe it's just me. I don't want 1.5 million options to buy from. Right? I don't. I want the top 10 with great curated reviews. I think if I launch an Amazon 2.0, right? It is fresh reviews. It's the top 10 are showing up or the top 15, whatever you want it to be. Right. That because I think what you're getting at is, they're looking to, that helps with conversion, I guess is what I'm saying. Everybody thinks they want every option in the world, but they don't. They really want, hey, these are the highest recommended. This is what everybody else says they bought.
Then they want to be able to justify the decision, right? Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
That's their data. That's their data equivalent.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, nice.
Full circle, right?
You're awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, but that's exactly right. And what we're finding with these creators within our network is that they're very good at being able to take a product and create a review and of course we can talk about like video reviews, tutorials, etc., but just a written review that lives on a website and can then be syndicated to Walmart, Target, wherever else a brand is selling its products, and that can really, really move the needle for them.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Any other questions for me? I've been picking your brain. This is an awesome conversation. I always love these stuff. You know that.
Yeah, me too.
Any other things that have popped up that are top of mind for you that I can help out with?
I don't think so. At least none that I can think of right now. Everything and nothing.
Okay.
We'll continue the conversation, and always appreciate your thought leadership, and you survived a cruise with your kids.
No, that was the past week was it was the highlight of their life. It was the most exhausting week of my life. But it was all good. Yet we all came back, and
Beautiful.
And the worst thing is immediately walking in the door. What's for dinner? Where we haven't made a meal all week long. You just walk in.
Where's the buffet? Where's the buffet?
Yeah, where's the buffet? Where's my soft serve ice cream on demand?
I thought this was just always here. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Amazing.
So much fun, my friend. Again, everybody,
so much fun.
Good friend Tom Logan from Cohley, the COHLEY.com. Go check out Cohley. They're great friends, partner, supporters network if you want to learn more. But with that, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Digital Deep Dive. Thanks, everybody, for listening in. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, all. Thanks, Aaron.
For sure, my friend.